Hey everybody, welcome to the channel and welcome back to another song bracket. I am very excited for today's episode because we're going to be covering my number one all-time favorite songwriter, Burt Bacharach. Burt Bacharach is somebody that I had always been aware of since I was a kid, mostly because of the Austin Powers movies and the couple of songs and cameos that he had in those movies. But about 4 years ago, I discovered a couple of songs of his that I found really pretty, so I decided to do a deep dive on his compositions, and I was completely blown away. It opened up an entire new world of music for me, and I also discovered that there were a lot of songs that he had written that I had known, but I just didn't know he was the composer. And after a pretty serious deep dive and obsession that lasted a couple of years, he has now been solidified as my number one favorite songwriter, and I'm very excited to be covering him for today's episode. So the way this bracket will work is it's going to be a total of 32 songs with 16 on each side, and it will just be a basic, process of elimination tournament until we continue to narrow everything down, and then we will arrive at the grand reveal of what my number one favorite Burt Bacharach song is. And all of these songs are going chronologically, and I tried to do a nice selection of different hits that he had written over the decades, and a lot of these are songs that are not actually recorded by Burt Bacharach. Most of the songs that he did write were for other artists, although he does have solo records as well, and some of those will pop up on here, but a lot of this is going to be different artists covering different versions of these songs. All right, I think that covers it. Let's jump right into it. So starting out with round one of side one, we have Magic Moments against Baby It's You. Two great songs from the late 50s and early 60s. I think for that one, I'm going to have to go with Magic Moments. I think that's a really pretty song, and I love the whistle part in the beginning, and just a great, classic song to come out of the late 50s. Next, we have Blue on Blue against True Love Never Runs Smooth. These are two probably lesser-known songs to a casual music fan, but they were, Bacharach hits back in the day. Blue on Blue, the famous version of that is Bobby Vinton, and then True Love Never Runs Smooth was by Gene Pitney. For this one, I got to go with True Love Never Runs Smooth. I think that song has such beautiful vocal melodies, some of the prettiest melodies of the earlier part of the Bacharach compositions, in my opinion. All right, now we're getting into the Dionne Warwick period of Burt Bacharach's songwriting. Both of these tracks were recorded by her. We have Don't Make Me Over versus Anyone Who Had a Heart. Both incredible songs, but I gotta go with Anyone Who Had a Heart. That is just such a legendary and classic Burt Bacharach song. And another pairing that are both tracks done by Dionne Warwick, although these have also been covered by other artists as well, but A House Is Not a Home versus Walk On By. That is a tough one. Those are both incredible songs, but if I had to pick one, this is going to be painful to have to narrow it down. I think I'll go with Walk On By. That's just such a classic. But A House Is Not a Home is also absolutely beautiful. All right, next we have probably the first Burt Bacharach song that I ever heard, What the World Needs Now Is Love, from the Austin Powers movie. That's where I was exposed to that. Versus There's Always Something There to Remind Me. Got to go with What the World Needs Now Is Love. Okay, and then next, What's New Pussycat versus Don't Go Breaking My Heart. That is an easy choice, Don't Go Breaking My Heart. I love the Dionne Warwick version of that. And then we have Are You There With Another Girl versus Trains and Boats and Planes. For me, that's another easy choice, Are You There With Another Girl. Incredible chord movements, great vocal melodies, and again, just another classic Dionne Warwick track. And then for the final pairing of round one of side one, we have Alfie versus The Look of Love. That is a tough one. Wow. I absolutely love both of these tracks. Alfie, obviously the Dionne Warwick version is classic. The Look of Love, I love the Dusty Springfield version. I mean, this is painful, but I think I have to go with Alfie, even though The Look of Love is honestly a very, very close second. Definitely gives Alfie a run for its money, but I think I have to go with Alfie because it's just such a legendary track. All right, that concludes round one of side one. Now for round one of side two, we start out with This Guy's in Love with You versus I Say a Little Prayer. Again, both incredible songs, but I have to go with This Guy's in Love with You. As much as I love the version of I Say a Little Prayer by Aretha Franklin, I think This Guy's in Love with You is just exceptionally beautiful. Okay, next we have Promises, Promises versus Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. You know what? Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head was a song that I thought was corny when I first heard it, but the more I listened to it, the more and more it grew on me, and I think it's a really pretty and just very sweet sounding song. So I'm going to go with that one. Although Promises, Promises is an incredible track and a great musical. Okay, next, The April Fools versus They Long to Be Close to You. For me, this is an easy choice, and it might surprise some people, but I'm going to go with The April Fools. This is a track that I consider to be one of the more underrated Burt Bacharach songs, and again, another great song recorded by Dionne Warwick. All right, next we have One Less Bell to Answer against Nikki. Nikki is another lesser-known Burt Bacharach song. It's an instrumental that was written for his daughter, who unfortunately passed away. And I think it's another exceptionally beautiful track. I'm going to go with Nikki for that one. Okay, now we get to the Living Together album, which is one of my favorite Burt Bacharach solo records. And we have The Balance of Nature versus I Come to You. That's another tough one. I got to think about that for a second. I like the piano work more on I Come to You, but I think as an overall song and the melodic content, I think The Balance of Nature is probably the slightest bit better, so I'm going to go with The Balance of Nature. Okay, next we have another song that I heard from the Austin Powers movie, which was a great version with Elvis Costello, I'll Never Fall in Love Again, versus That's What Friends Are For, which was one of his legendary songs to come out of the 80s. This one, I got to go with I'll Never Fall in Love Again. I think that song is just so beautiful. And speaking of Elvis Costello, the next pairing is from the collaboration album that Burt Bacharach and Elvis Costello did, titled Painted from Memory. Probably my favorite album of the entire Burt Bacharach solo discography, if we're including collaborations as part of that. And we have God Give Me Strength versus Toledo. Gotta go with God Give Me Strength. That's another just absolutely legendary song that has so much great melodic content, great lyrics, amazing production. Just an album that is well worth checking out for anybody who is not aware of it. Painted from Memory with Burt Bacharach and Elvis Costello. One of my favorite albums of the 90s. And then our last pairing for round one of side two. Love Is Still the Answer versus Stronger Than Before. This one, I'll probably go with Love Is Still the Answer. Okay, round two of side one, we have Magic Moments versus True Love Never Runs Smooth. Definitely going to go with True Love Never Runs Smooth. Another kind of more underrated Bacharach track that I would definitely recommend to check out. All right, now two more Dionne Warwick songs that are paired together. Anyone Who Had a Heart versus Walk On By. Love both of these songs, but I feel like I have to go with Anyone Who Had a Heart. All right, next, What the World Needs Now Is Love versus Don't Go Breaking My Heart. Again, love both of these tracks, but I think I have to go with What the World Needs Now Is Love. And then for our last pairing, we have Are You There With Another Girl versus Alfie. Another easy one, definitely going to go with Alfie for that one. Those were all pretty easy choices. Let's see if round two of side two is going to be as easy. So we have This Guy's in Love with You versus Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. Definitely going to go with This Guy's in Love with You. All right, next, The April Fools versus Nikki. That's a bit of a tougher one. I think I'll pick The April Fools just because, it's a vocal track, so I feel like there's a little more substance to it. But as far as instrumental tracks go, I do think Nikki is one of the best ones of the Bacharach catalog. Okay, next, The Balance of Nature versus I'll Never Fall in Love Again. I got to go with I'll Never Fall in Love Again. And then the final pairing, God Give Me Strength versus Love Is Still the Answer. Don't even have to think about that one. God Give Me Strength. All right, that concludes round two. Now to round three to narrow it down to our final four. We have True Love Never Runs Smooth versus Anyone Who Had a Heart. That's an easy one. Anyone Who Had a Heart, hands down. And then What the World Needs Now Is Love versus Alfie. Both are absolutely amazing songs, but again, I feel like I have to go with Alfie. I think that's only fitting. All right, and now to narrow it down to the last two from this side, We have This Guy's in Love with You versus The April Fools. I love both of these songs so much, but again, This Guy's in Love with You, it's pretty hard to top that one. I gotta go with that. Okay, in our last pairing, to narrow down the final four, we have I'll Never Fall in Love Again versus God Give Me Strength. Wow, another really tough one. I feel like it's sacrilegious to not choose God Give Me Strength for this one, but I do think I'm going to go with I'll Never Fall in Love Again. I know some people are going to think I'm crazy, but I have a special place in my heart for that song, and I can't argue with that. So I'm going to go with that one. Now we have gotten down to our final four. So now the final round of side one, we have Anyone Who Had a Heart versus Alfie. Wow. That's an almost impossible choice to make. I'm sure a lot of people watching this would feel the same way. These are both arguably the best songs that Burt Bacharach has ever written. It's going to be painful to have to pick one. I think I'm going to go with Anyone Who Had a Heart. Sorry to all of the Alfie fans. One of his best ballads that he's ever written, but I do think I go back and listen to Anyone Who Had a Heart a little bit more. And then the final round of side two, This Guy's in Love with You versus I'll Never Fall in Love Again. Got to go with This Guy's in Love with You. That one wasn't as hard as the previous one for me. So now we're down to our final two, Anyone Who Had a Heart versus This Guy's in Love with You. This one is not a tough choice for me. I'm going to go with This Guy's in Love with You. That's been my favorite Burt Bacharach song for a pretty long time. And sometimes when I make these brackets, I don't know where it's going to end up at the very end because there are certain bands or certain artists where I don't have a definitive favorite song by them. But This Guy's in Love with You, I knew that was going to be the number one going into this. But I was curious, what else was going to end up in the final brackets. And like I said, it seems pretty accurate based on my preferences, just what made it towards the end. But, anybody who is interested, I would highly recommend exploring the music of Burt Bacharach. I think he is the greatest pop songwriter of all time, between his beautiful melodies, which are very colorful and have a lot of unorthodox, jumps, very intervallic, lots of really unique note choices, very tasteful chord movements with a lot of jazzy harmonies going on, as well as his really adventurous sense of rhythm with, his classic, 5-bar phrases or a 3-bar phrase or a random bar of 2 getting thrown in. Just all of these things that are very outside of the norm for traditional pop music. And there are other people that do it as well. But I think when it comes to very sophisticated pop music, I think Burt Bacharach is pretty much as good as it gets. So I would highly recommend anybody interested, definitely check him out. And I have a playlist on Spotify pretty much going chronologically from his music from the 50s all the way up to his most recent stuff that he had written prior to his passing. And I also actually have a second channel called the Classic Vinyl Archive, where I am trying to preserve old, hard-to-find Burt Bacharach songs that are not on any streaming or aren't on YouTube. So I've uploaded a good handful of those as well. So for any diehard Burt Bacharach fans watching, please check out that channel. And yeah, I think that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it was enjoyable. And if you're interested, please feel free to check out my other song brackets, as well as my album tier lists and my top 5 favorite album series, where I walk you through my 5 favorite albums from every year. And please let me know your thoughts in the comments, how you feel about this bracket, where you agree and disagree with some of my song picks, and let me know what your favorite Burt Bacharach songs are. I would love to hear your thoughts. All right, that is it for today. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you at the next video. Take care.